Yeah,
And then I think you should have access to just that.
I do.
Okay, Howard, you can start whenever you're ready.
I think today is our last lab meeting for the quarter, is that correct?
It is, yes.
So welcome to the last lab meeting of the quarter. And I have notes from Jean that I'm going to read from because there's an in-person phronesis conference this week that is being sponsored by the Hellenic Center, of the Center for Hellenic Studies, I guess. It's being held on March 1st to 2nd, starts at 9 a.m. It's in the Social Science Research Building, room 122. That would be the conference, the classroom that is, lecture hall that is down there. It is free and open to the public. No advance registration is needed. Find out more by visiting wisdomcenter.uchicago.edu for details. Okay. And it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today, who is our colleague, Fan Yang, who is a research assistant professor in the Department of Psychology at the University of Chicago. Fan directs the Human Nature and Potentials Lab and is lead investigator at the Center for Practical Wisdom. Fan's research program focuses on our capacities to devote to things larger than the self, self-transcendence, in relation to fundamental questions in life, such as happiness and meaning. And she has a number of research publications in the areas of self-transcendence, wisdom, awe, and meaning in life. She recently received the Best Paper Award from the Existential Psychology Society, and she'll be speaking on emotion-wise today. So please join me in welcoming Fan.
Thank you so much, Howard, for the nice introduction, and also thank you so much for the invitation. I also think it's a very good opportunity for me to hear your ideas and thoughts. So I will pause during different sections of the talk, but also feel free to just raise questions and comments at any time of the talk. So today I'm going to talk about realizing the potential of our inner life. So I want to start the talk by congratulating everybody for living in the most prosperous time in human history. So let's imagine, just take a moment and let's imagine if we were King Henry VIII or Queen Elizabeth I. So if we were traveling to the United States during spring break from their times. So this is just a list of the nice things we're able to observe in modern life. So basically, it's just really shocking, like people can live so much longer than people in the past, largely thanks to the unbelievable healthcare and medicine we have invented. And also it's just so easy to connect to others, so easy to see the world, and so easy to learn about anything, anywhere. Also, it's just so easy to satisfy all kinds of desires, from the desires of our stomach to the desires of our mind. So basically, we often talk about we wish we could live like kings and queens. And actually, we are really underestimating ourselves by wishing that, because we're actually living a better life, basically, than kings and queens in the past. So basically, this the fantastic external world like we're living in raises the question about like what does our inner world looks like? So is it equally good, or are we much happier than people hundreds of years ago? So actually, the answer is not very obvious, because, for example, based on this graph, like from 4 different countries, over the past 200 years, it seems like people's subjective well-being just has been up and down. So even though like we are not at historical low, as if like we were living in the wartime right now, but it's not like, but we are not happier than like people in the past who have reached like their high like happiness levels. So basically, this is just like very puzzling. Although, as I said, like during the wartime is really low, and we probably are having the longest like peaceful time during history right now. And most people, to be honest, like we may not feel like really depressed, but it doesn't mean like we are actually really flourishing. So it seems like I have to show the, oh, sorry, Shannon, I think your method works for the notes, but doesn't work for the animations. Okay, so I'm going notes free. I don't think I really need the notes. So basically, like sociologists have actually recently discovered this new emotional trend that defines modern life, which is called languishing. So basically, it's like we do not feel depressed, but we not feel really happy either. It's kind of joyless. It's just a certain type of apathy, and we really just feel emotionally indifferent. A lot of people actually, when they wake up every day, they feel, the things and the jobs they do are just bullshit. And still there are a lot of people, they just go about their day looking very normal. They do their job, they do their work, but secretly they are practicing some kind of quiet quitting. They just put in minimal amount of effort for them to complete the work. So in fact, actually more salient or more explicitly, like young people in China right now, they have initiated this movement of lying in flight. They refuse to be very motivated like for work or for life, and this is spreading to other areas in the world as well. So basically, this is not very encouraging or very, very nice to see, because that is not like, when our parents gave birth to us, that's not what the type of life they hope to see we're living now. So actually, we asked hundreds of parents what kind of things they really want for their children. And happiness is actually the number one thing mentioned by the majority of parents, and it's the top of the list. So basically, it's just like it's a real puzzle. Given how fantastic our external world is, and with this kind of all kinds of modern technology, we're even living more lavish life than kings and queens in the past. Why we're still not as happy as we can be, right? So does it mean happiness is really so hard? Is it is something that is just not possible, not within our reach? So basically, my talk today is just to let you see, actually, just with a little bit of wisdom, happiness is very much attainable. And I think the most encouraging aspect of this whole thing is, that little bit of wisdom is not something that we have to accumulate over time and something we can only have until the very old age. It's actually something, very rooted in all of us from even the very beginning of life. Okay, so, happiness. So it is something that seems so hard to attain. Part of it is happiness is just a very deceptively simple but actually very elusive concept. If we want to have happiness, we really have to first understand what is happiness anyway. So this question looks very simple, but it's actually a very difficult answer. And everybody, everyone, different people may have different answers to this question. But does it mean we just cannot reach consensus? Does it mean perhaps underlying different types of answers, maybe we still have some kind of shared themes underlying our common views about happiness? So I think it is going to be very informative to learn from people who have thought a lot about happiness, basically the philosophers. So there are different philosophical views about happiness. So for example, on one hand, when we think about happiness, we tend to think about things that make us feel really good. So for example, taking a walk in the forest, or maybe having a nice meal with families and friends. For some people, it's shopping, buying things you like. Or even if if you have a mosquito bite and you just by scratching it, you get a lot of good feelings too. So according to this view, being happy is very simple. It's just ask yourself what you like, what you enjoy doing. So as long as you can do what you like, you have lots of good feelings, you satisfy your desires, that means like you are happy. But actually tracing back to Aristotle, so there is this alternative, deeper, more surprising view about happiness, which means like happiness is not just about feeling good, it's also about being a good person and living a good life. So actually, in retrospect, I didn't learn about this view of happiness from Aristotle. I actually learned from it from a witch. So basically, in this fairy tale, the queen is very wicked and really jealous of the beautiful princess. She wants to destroy the happiness of the princess. But instead of taking away all the things that could make the princess feel really good, she actually wants to turn this princess from a kind person into an evil person, so that she could not be happy again. So this is a great example supporting Aristotle's view. Happiness is not just about feeling good; it's about actually being good. So the question is, which of these views actually more reflect, ordinary people's view about happiness? So if in this world, there is one population that is most likely to associate happiness with feeling good, that is actually our lovely children. Because we all know, how much, just the satisfy simple desires and getting what they want. We know how much that matters for young children. And we also know how sad they will be if they don't get what they want, right? We don't observe this as salient from adults, but we see it all the time with young kids. So the question is what do children think about happiness? So we can actually hear from their own voices.
Don't judge me. I like rainbows, sparkles, and unicorns. I'm that kind of girl. Makes me happy? What makes me super happy? Eating candy, eating bacon.
Usually just eating.
My favorite foods make me happy. Ice cream, bubblegum, cotton candy, tacos, chicken candy, and feeding live mice to my friend Snake. That brings me joy.
What makes you happy?
Animal cats, playing with chickens. Puppies, my dog. He's sweet and so cuddable. Oh.
What makes you feel happy?
Something that makes me happy is when they play my brother's iPad with me. A toy. When I get Legos. Having a play date. Playing on electronics. Playing games.
Inside games or outside games?
Inside games.
What's your favorite game?
Dragon City. Pokemon. Roblox. Super Smash Bros.
What about when you lose in video games?
I don't care that much because I know I'm really bad.
Okay, so we get the idea, eat and play, basically two largest themes in children's mind when they think about happiness. So these simple pleasures definitely matter a lot. So what about the things that are really good for children that we hope they will enjoy? Well, it doesn't seem like the good things make children very happy. For example, definitely not doing homework, especially math. Okay, so the question is, are children, basically, do they only care about these kind of simple pleasures and very materialized, very sensory-based kind of happiness? So that is the question we examined in one of our papers. So it's in collaboration with Dr. Yara Dunham and Josh Noble. So in most of the papers I mentioned today, we conducted multiple studies. So for the sake of time, I just want to give you a tapas kind of a presentation. So just give you some selected findings to let you see, have a sense of what we did and what we find. So basically in this paper, we just presented children with two very simple stories. In one story, there is this very nice person who helps others, shares things with others. And in the other story, there's this mean person who hits others and steals other people's things. But in both stories, we tell children, they can get everything they want. So basically, every day, both persons, before they go to bed, they feel they have a lot of good feelings for the day. So if we think, happiness is about getting what you want and feeling good, then basically the two persons should be equally happy. But actually, that's not what we found. So children across ages, as young as age 4, and also adults, they think the nice person is very happy, but they think the mean person is just so much less happy. The nice person is also as happy as a neutral person, basically who is not particularly nice, not mean, but can fulfill the desires. So it seems like the effect is particularly driven by, moral badness affects like happiness. So we think, this is really interesting. So if children care about both feeling good and being good, then which one, matters more for happiness? So then we have another simple story in which we have two persons. One person is really nice, who spends a lot of time, in the hospital helping others who are in pain, and he feels, sad most of the time. He doesn't have many good feelings. He feels sad for people who really suffer. And the other person is very mean, but this person actually has a lot of good feelings. This person spends most of his time stealing other people's things and playing with those things, give him a lot of, good feelings. So in other words, this nice person has fewer good feelings than the mean person. So the question is, who is happier? Well, we actually found, the majority of children and adults, they actually think this nice person who has fewer good feelings is actually happier than the mean person who has more good feelings. So there really seems like moral goodness matters a lot for children's sense of happiness. So we were thinking, moral goodness is definitely a very important trait of the person, right? So how about other things we also really like and are very positive? How about like being smart? Does that matter for happiness? So that's why we have another simple story. We have a smart person and not smart person. This smart person is so smart, he finds everything so boring. So he doesn't have many good feelings. Whereas the not smart person finds everything so interesting. So he has a lot of good feelings all the time. Whenever I say this, children tend to smile and say, I know people like this. So, and the question is again, like who is happier? So this time, very interestingly, actually most children and adults, they actually think, the not smart person who has more good feelings is actually happier than the smart person who has fewer good feelings. So in other words, this time they just go with whoever has more good feelings. So good feelings affect like whoever they think is happier, but smartness, like unlike moral goodness, it doesn't have the power to reverse this type of judgment. So it seems, the effect of moral goodness on children's sense of happiness is relatively unique, actually. So basically, these are the words like children explain, like the answers children explain about why they think good people are happy. They say, because doing good stuff to others make you happy. Make other people feel good, make yourself feel really good. And bad people are not happy because they think that's not the best way to be happy. Like he is not happy for the right reasons. So it really seems children are engaging kind of moral reasoning, and they expect, happiness not just about having good feelings, it has to be for the right reasons. So basically, I feel, like these findings maybe could change how we view children. So they are not as simple-minded as we think, like they actually do not just care about, basic material desires or like very sensory-based kind of pleasures. But at the same time, I also think these findings may also change like how we think about happiness. Happiness, I think in this aspect, I think Aristotle is right to some extent. It seems like even ordinary people, we do not think happiness is just about feeling good. We also think, happiness is about being good. So, like whenever, actually before I did this research, I was really thinking, happiness has been talked about by people throughout history, even as early as Aristotle, right? Can we say something more about the topic? Well, I guess like even Aristotle may not really anticipate, even children as young as age 4 or 5, they are able to know that, bad people are not happy because no one can be happy alone. So I think this is just a really encouraging picture, not only about happiness, but also about human nature to some extent. So basically this work is more about, like how much our action, how much like the consequences of our actions will affect our sense of happiness. So basically if our actions have bad consequences for others, it seems like children and adults, they do not think like we can be happy doing those actions. So the question is, what about actions that only affect the self? a lot of actions we engage in seems to affect not affect others, but only affect ourselves. So with my collaborators, Xinhui Chen and Paul Harris, so we examine this question again with the young children. So there are some kind of activities or actions in life which will be very pleasant and enjoyable to engage in, and they are typically harmless when we just do a little bit of it. But it could be harmful when we do a lot, such as eating a lot of candies, playing a lot of video games. So oftentimes, young children, even some adults, seem like they don't really care about the consequences to themselves. They always want to engage more and more of these things, and seems that is the way they make themselves happy. But do they really care about it or not? So that's why we presented the children with these type of actions. And then we asked for their favorite engagement amount. And we found that, when we told them their favorite engagement is normatively good, which means harmless to the self and permitted the parents, children attributed high levels of happiness for engaging in those. Whereas when we say, your favorite engagement is actually normatively bad, that kind of amount of candies you prefer to eat every day actually harm yourself and also are forbidden by the parents. Children, they anticipate being significantly less happy by doing these things. So in other words, I think we all know the concept of guilty pleasures. So it really seems like it's not just a metaphor or something. We really associate a lower level of happiness when we know, those kind of activities do harm the self to some extent. So the take-home message for myself is whenever possible, giving different activities, I want to choose both the activities that are enjoyable and also good for the self. And try to stay away from the activities that are enjoyable but are bad to the self. It sounds very obvious, but when we are really tempted, we tend to lose this insight. So taken together, these studies actually reveal, how children think about happiness. So it raises the question about, are they able to also experience happiness by doing a normatively good activities? And also, how about in a longer term fashion, not just in the moment? So in another paper, we did examine that question, and we did find, children could derive happiness from doing good actions. So this is done with my MAPS student Yan Wenyu and my collaborator Dr. Xinyan Chen. So basically, we examined a longitudinal study with over 2,000 children, and we found, higher levels of prosocial behaviors that benefit other people or have higher levels of academic achievement. They actually predicted higher levels of happiness over 1 year time, and also controlling for how much their desires are satisfied on a daily basis. So it seems like these kind of good actions do have some do contribute to our sense of happiness beyond the desired satisfactions. Even though sometimes we tend to view, helping others or having high achievement as, have to come at the expense of happiness. We tend to think of them in tension, but in tension to each other, but actually that's not what we find. We actually found the reverse direction as well. So children who have been observed as happier, they also tend to have higher levels of, they also tend to be more prosocial and have higher levels of academic achievement 1 year later as well. So it seems they are going hand to hand with each other. So right now, I'm summarizing all of these findings in a perspective paper that is under review right now. So basically, talk about this idea. So, Oscar Wilde, once he actually said, the best way to make children good is to make them happy. But I think given a lot of findings in the field and from my lab, we can also say, the best way to make children happy is to make them good. So basically, these are the major takeaways for in terms of happiness. So I think it's also a good time to pause. And if you have any questions about the studies or about happiness in general, we can, chat a little bit. Yes, please. Oh.
Are there any like physiological measures that have been linked to both like adult happiness, and if so, are those also seen in children, or is that like, are there any papers about that?
I believe there are. I'm not super familiar with the papers using those measures because like I care about how people perceive happiness, like what do we think is the nature of happiness. But I think like there are papers showing like people, they experience a type of like a warm glow when they help other people, and they have brain imaging data showing like the reward like signals in the brain, in response to that. And very surprisingly, I think usually we tend to adapt to all kinds of like happiness very easily. So something you feel you feel very rewarded over time, that would go away. But actually, people are very slow to adapt to kind of like a moral goodness, like a action. The type of warm glow you get from doing morally good actions actually stay longer. So it's very good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so when you said in the very beginning that the parents, a lot of what they ask, or a lot of what they desire is to make their children happy, have you looked into, and doing good by others is making yourself happy, have you looked into how parents will sometimes want a certain type of happiness for their kid that isn't exactly what their kid wants? And so when a parent puts a kid in a program because they think in the long run it's going to be great for them, but the kid rejects it and knows in the end that it's not going to be good for them, but the parent thinks in their head that they're doing something good for their child. Has that been a conversation at all?
I think that's a really great point. I'm not aware of any like work that has looked at this. In fact, I think happiness among children is actually a very new topic in developmental psychology. So there haven't been like a lot of studies, especially looking at how parents like wish for their children's happiness. But I think what you just talked about is very relevant, or to the idea of paternalism. So basically parents, they don't just want to make their children unhappy, basically. So it's more about like they impose their own values when they try to make their children happy from their own perspectives, right? So I think it's a very hard question, and we have to differentiate the different cases. So for example, like parents who are being paternalistic in terms of trying to have their children stay away from like unsafe actions. I think like those kind of things, actually we have some data showing, children and adults, they actually really appreciate this type of paternalism. They actually think, children will be actually happier when the parents actually steer them away from the unsafety actions, even if the child themselves really desire that. So, but in other cases, if like it's only for some kind of things that doesn't really matter so much, like children, they want to wear a certain type of clothes or they want to play a certain type of toy, and there's no substantial health or safety reasons for the parents to inhibit those kind of desires. Children, they don't really appreciate that. Like we found actually children think those are very unjustified. They wish that the adults don't do that. So I think it really depends on like what the matter is, and whether it is kind of really important for the children's like a safety or physical or mental health well-being. Yeah.
I think any other question?
I've got two questions from our two statements from the online audience. So one statement is just, I'm not sure that happy non-philosopher people worry about defining happiness. And then Francesca has a question. She says, the problem is that we associate happiness with material things, and we reproduce this thinking in younger generations. Do you have any suggestions on how we might change this?
I think that's a great question. And I mean, like, so basically I'm a psychologist. I have to make claims that based on data. So that's why like it's always very hard for me to give like concrete, like parenting or educational advice. But I want to say maybe two things. One thing, I want to make everybody aware that the findings do not mean material desires don't matter. So basically, all of the findings are compatible with the idea, like children do care about those desires being fulfilled. And so basically, if we think material desires don't matter, let's just skip dinner tonight, and then we'll see whether it matters or not, right? So, but I think the take-home message is more about we shouldn't just stay at that level. And I think like by revealing, like what kind of things children really, what kind of ideas children really hold about happiness actually can really be really helpful for us when we think about how to make them happier. So if we think children only care about material desires, we are more likely to, have birthday parties, buy them all kinds of gifts. We may just do those kind of things. Those will come to mind when we want to promote children's happiness. But I hope the findings can actually help parents to realize, actually from a very young age, children are capable of appreciate your happiness beyond material desires. So I hope like by recognizing this, it could encourage parents to think more and don't hesitate and don't feel, like perhaps they're they're being overly, moral when they encourage children to do good things. So actually, children do appreciate those kind of effects, the effects of those kind of moral actions in happiness. So I think basically, different parents may still figure out the different ways they want to encourage happiness in their children. But a general direction we could all try to think more is, so beyond the material desires, what kind of, moral or intellectual things we could provide to our children to just give them a richer happiness. Yeah.
Yeah, so thanks for your talk. That was really interesting.
So in our longitudinal paper, we find like a bidirection relationship. And I think in the field, there's also some theorizing about, there's a positive feedback loop between being good and feeling good. So, and there are theories, so basically my work, the work I show today mostly focus on how, we think being good matters for feeling good. But there is like a theory and also lots of empirical evidence among adults showing, positive feelings in general, they have this like a broaden and build quality to them. So basically when we feel very happy. So it's kind of neutral in this way. So that's why I don't think people have to be exceptionally good in order to be happy. But we definitely can't be exceptionally bad if we want to be happy. Yeah.
But it seems like there are a lot of social forces that sort of.
Yeah.
When do you see this going away with kids, right? So the kids are happy. When does it go away in their development, and why do you think they all of a sudden become unhappy? We become unhappy adults searching for happiness that we had when we were kids.
That's such a great question. Like in the literature, as I say, happiness is a very new topic in developmental psychology. So I think part of the reason is also because like kids tend to be very positive in general. So depression rates among kids are very low. And also like kids, they tend to think themselves as very positive. They tend to assume they know everything, like they are really smart. So they rate themselves as above average. So, but really, very interestingly, like as we know, like many adolescents at least, right? Like there are suicide rates, like depression and things. And how that happens, actually, I don't think there's a very, as far as I know, I don't think there's a very good reason. So some competitiveness, like in the school environment, has been found to lead to lower levels of well-being among school-age children. And also, like I feel, it's like a social comparison and competitiveness and all kinds of stress. So seems to play a role. But I mean, like I'm not aware of any extensive study examining all kinds of factors. But I think that study should be done, and it would be very, very important.
I was wondering if we know if and how much kids kind of understand like a bidirectionality or a causality between being bad and being unhappy, because I think like you have the finding that they do associate those two together, and I think perhaps a lot of adults would kind of have a like I said, like a bidirectional understanding of that if you're behaving poorly, you'll be less happy, because we talked about feelings of guilt and social like alienation. But I think especially with there's kind of also this idea that if you're behaving poorly, it might be because you're unhappy. And I think adults sometimes, not to like make excuses for bad behavior, but there's kind of like these common sayings of like, oh, hurt people. And I even remember as a kid, sometimes I would be told, and this is just like anecdotal, but like, oh, if someone's being mean to you, don't be mean back, because they might be struggling with something in their own life, and that's why they're being mean to you, is that they're like suffering. And I'm wondering if we know at what age kids kind of start to get those messages, or if they understand them when they're really little and they're kind of making these judgments of, oh, this person is mean, so they're less happy, if we know which direction they're kind of believing the relationship comes from.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So our studies mostly only focus on one direction right now. Like we only focus on, how being a bad person makes you unhappy. And I definitely can imagine, like an unhappy person, like we can understand why like an unhappy person could be bad to others as well, right? At least as an adult, I hold this intuition as well. So I think it would be very interesting to examine, whether kids hold the same intuition, and also whether understanding this aspect, maybe could make us like more tolerant of bad behaviors from others, right? So it seems like they are not intentional to harm you, but maybe they are suffering something themselves. So I do like the direction, and that'd be very interesting to study as well. Yeah. Shannon, I don't know how much time we have, like, because I feel I have a sense this can go on like for a while. Less than 20. Okay. So because I do not think happiness is the best thing we can have in life. So that's why like maybe I could show you a little bit more, and then we can also save these like later on, right? So because I really have that question, is happiness like sufficient for living a good life, for having, the best emotional life possible? Actually, we can engage in a little bit of like a thought experiment. So this is the Sisyphus. So basically in the Greek mythology, Sisyphus was condemned to push this boulder up a hill, and every time when he successfully does it, the boulder will come back. So he has to repeatedly do this. So this Sisyphus image has been widely viewed as, a tragedy, and it's the type of life nobody wants to live in, basically. So that's why a lot of people, they are very motivated to save Sisyphus from this situation. And one idea is, how about let's give Sisyphus a desire for pushing the boulder? So basically, Sisyphus loves pushing the boulder. He feels so happy when he does it. So does it mean like, now Sisyphus' life, is it the type of life you really want to live now? So, I mean, like a lot of people may still feel something is missing from this life. Well, some people even feel, it's more tragic because he falls in love with such a, a meaningless action. So this means, like the thing that is missing from his life right now is not happiness anymore, right? So it means like we want something else besides happiness. And that's something we really want, is meaning. So we want, at the end, even not at the end of our life, we just want, the actions we do or the moments we have, they can add up to something more than the momentary or the trivial. We hope to have something more long-lasting. So it's just a human desire that I feel like a lot of us may share. So basically, I think that is actually very bad news for us because, as many existential philosophers say, our life does not inherently have any meaning. So for example, Sartre has been very famously claiming, life has no meaning, it's up to you to give it a meaning. So, I mean, he actually was very well-intentioned when he said that. He meant, we could feel totally free to live the type of life we want. We should have the freedom to construct the meaning for ourselves. But I feel, for someone who really needs meaning, it's like, if you're hungry and you walk into a restaurant and the chef tells you, there is no food in this restaurant, it's up to you to give yourself some food. So does it make you less hungry? So that's the type of feeling I felt when I felt the strong need for answering this meaning question as a teenager. I just couldn't find a good answer anywhere. So basically the question is, if the word is not inherently meaningful, how do we find meaning in this like meaningless word? So my previous maths student, Mengdi Huang, and I, we examined this question among adults, and we actually found, across 7 experiments, we consistently found people think happiness does not equal meaning. A happy life doesn't mean like it is a meaningful life. And the key difference between happiness and meaning is more self-transcendent than happiness. So basically, as I say, like when we think about happiness, as long as we are not bad, as long as we don't hurt others, if we can satisfy our desires, we benefit ourselves, then we're happy. But for meaning, when people think about meaning, they really expect something more than only benefit the self. They actually emphasize a lot about whether you can benefit people and others and society beyond yourself. So I'm going to give you a very simple idea of what we did. So in the last study of the paper, we just gave people very simple, photo identification tasks. So we just tell them, to identify how many people in the pictures wear summer clothes, or do the pictures have more than 10 people in the photos. So we conducted the study during the pandemic, and for one task, we just told them, it actually benefits the society. So what you do, the photos can be sent to UChicago AI lab. Maybe there is a lab right now. There wasn't such a lab at that time, and benefit our machine learning project. And for the other task, we just say, this task benefits yourself. If you identify more photos correctly, you just earn more. So basically, those are our self-transcendence versus self-enhancement manipulations. And then people, they just rate, they do the task. After they do each task, they will rate, how much does doing this task make you feel meaningful or happy? Half people rated meaning, half people rated happiness. So what we found is like people's meaning and happiness feelings were almost opposite. So when people think about happiness, they reported they feel like doing the task that could help themselves earn more money, that task make them feel happier than doing the task that could help contribute to society. Whereas when they think about meaning, they actually feel the task that benefits society is more meaningful than the task that benefits themselves. So it really seems, meaning and happiness, although we often talk about them together, we actually don't think of the two as the same. and actually we would think about meaning, we really think, like doing something that could contribute to society beyond ourselves actually feel us, make us feel more meaningful. So these findings actually really answer my long-standing question since I was a teenager about, what gives rise to meaning. I felt like at that moment I was focusing too much on myself, which is not surprising why I couldn't find meaning in my life. So, but these findings do not answer another question I had, since that time. Because I felt, that kind of need for meaning just came out from nowhere, like when I was an adolescent. That's also the typical age people associate with a need for meaning. But I was thinking, nothing can come from nowhere. Like everything has, as a developmental psychologist, we think there is a developmental trajectory for every human psychology phenomenon. So basically, I was thinking whether, maybe a very basic need, a need for a basic sense for meaning, maybe is very deeply rooted in us, maybe available from very early years. So actually, my children, they gave me some kind of inspirations. So these are just some kind of the structures my children, they construct over the years. And as you see, they cherish them, we think they're great, but they don't want us to take them apart. And that's a problem over the years. So, and then I found something. I found like if I just take a picture for each of it, they will be much more likely to let me, to take them apart. So I was thinking, maybe simply knowing that the things you create can exist in the world matters, for us. Maybe it's just a very minimal sense of meaning that we need in ourselves. So that's why in a recent project with my previous MAPS student, Yilin Liu, and also my lab manager, we just investigate this question to see if children have a very minimal, need for meaning. So basically, we just gave children a Sisyphus type of task. We told them, you are going to have some puzzle pieces. You can use them to put together some artwork. After you do that, we are going to take them apart, and then you are going to do it again. So basically, this go on. It's a repetitive situation that has no obvious meaning. And we contrast this with a minimal meaning. We just say, you do this repeatedly also, except that each time we are going to save the heart. Okay? And we also present with a different game that is just one round, because we want to see if they need this type of meaning when they do something repeatedly, or if they need it even just for doing some one-time action. And we found, the majority of children, they just overwhelmingly prefer this minimal meaning task over the no meaning task. Even though, this minimal meaning is so minimal, it's just they're not going to take it away. It doesn't even exist in the world. It's very purely virtual. I mean, so this really shows, like perhaps we have this basic need for meaning, which is also bad news because, nothing lasts forever. So if we just want to see our work exist in the world, if we think about it, well, all the things, they may gone one day. And if we think that way, maybe we are not motivated to create anything. So, but the second part of this quote actually, give me some kind of hope and some kind of information. So it says, nothing lasts forever, but maybe all we have is what's between hello and goodbye. So how about, so if the outcome of our creations do not have lasting significance, maybe the process actually matters. So to examine this idea, we give children like another very simple task. So we just told them ahead of time, there are some kind of pieces you can put together artwork, and then it will be taken apart. So you can choose to create the heart. But if you don't like the option, you have the simpler option, which is effortless. You just directly drag these pieces to the basket. And we found, when we told children this, like actually most adults, they just prefer this simpler option. No one wants to put together heart. And children, they are half and half. So, but we just did a one-sentence intervention. We told them, you know what? Actually, the point of the game is to have fun. It's just to enjoy yourself. And then with this, like a one-sentence instruction, actually, like, children and adults, they are much more likely to choose the create option. So it really seems, happiness and meaning, they are different, and they work together. So basically, when the outcome of our actions, perhaps we cannot have like anything long-lasting from it. Actually, focusing on the enjoyment of our process actually matters. So depending on the situation of my papers and stuff, I try to adopt one mindset over another. So if I feel such a difficult project, I don't know whether we publish it. Like, I focus on the process. So and that really helps. So basically, this shows even young children, they have a basic need for meaning. And based on these last findings, I also when I try to persuade them to to take apart those things, if they don't want to, I just remind them, oh, do you feel you already had fun in the process? And I feel like they are much more likely to let me do it once they remember how happy they were when they were doing it. So it seems the next slide was very motivated to jump out already. So we're good in time, or yeah, okay. So basically, like very luckily, life does not only offer us like a minimal sense of meaning. It also offers us pretty spectacular things, such as, for example, like skies like this, or cliffs like this, canyons like this, or waterfalls like this. So basically, when we are in front of these sceneries, we feel a sense of vastness that greatly exceeds our current understanding. So we have to accommodate in these kind of sceneries in our mind. So these kind of feelings are called awe experiences. So it's basically one of the best feelings we can have in life. So what we were really curious is, like, are children able to even like appreciate these kind of very awe-inspiring, like zooming out kind of experiences? So with my student Arta, we showed children these kind of experience images versus like everyday sceneries. And we found, like awe-inspiring experiences are just appreciated by children. So they report they have like a sense of, they want to say wow in response to these images. Older children and adults, they also report a certain level of fear. They feel happy, and they feel a sense of small self. They feel like they feel these images make them feel very small, and also stimulate them to learn about new things in the world. They also just really enjoy looking at these images. And very amazingly, like, the effects not only hold for these positive, like feel-good kind of experiences, they also hold even for vast, like natural disasters. Children also feel a sense of awe, a sense of fear, a sense of being small, and this natural disaster can stimulate the children to explore things and learn new things as well. So this is the last study I'm going to present. So with Yana and Dr. Howard Nussbaum, we actually show, like all experiences, they not only feel good like in themselves, but also they can promote something good in ourselves as well. So we found, like, having people watch awe-inspiring videos and these kind of zooming out experiences, together with giving them some kind of opportunity to create music, these kind of like focused, very flow-inducing and very zooming in kind of experiences, they both promote a sense. They both promote higher levels of wisdom. So after doing these kind of activities, people are more likely to endorse values that reflect, like wisdom, interpersonal wisdom. They are more likely to take other people's perspectives to solve conflicts. They are more aware of their epistemic gap in their mind, and they are more willing to improve these aspects as well. Okay, so all of these findings show, what kind of rich emotional world we actually have. So yes, we care about pleasure, but we also have happiness, meaning, and awe and flow, and some other like emotions that I haven't talked about today. And very interestingly, like the good or the best emotional experiences we have all have a certain level of self-transcendence to some extent, if you think about it. So actually, happiness is tied to moral goodness. It's not just about, like focusing on yourself, but also we have to be mindful about how our actions affect others. And for meaning is a more self-transcendent concept than happiness. We really emphasize about how much we can contribute to others and to society when we think about meaning. And all flow, compassion, and elevation, they are typical like self-transcendent emotions. When we have these emotions, we tend to feel a loss of self-boundary, and we just feel we are being one with either the vast natural world or maybe the task at hand. Or in response to some kind of like moral actions performed by others, and also like all of these, most of these actually are capable of being experienced by even very young children. So really seems like we have great potential in our emotional world, because children, they actually represent our very natural state, represent our nature and also our potential. So with the knowledge, like we are capable of all of these, actually, I feel very surprised and also very disappointing to know, oftentimes like we are not living up to realize our potential. So for example, like a lot of children and students, they're addicted to screens, social media, or video games. And it's also not just a phenomenon among young children. Actually, this recent new trend is the senior people. Like a lot of people after they retire, they have so much free time, and they are equally or even more addicted to social media than the young children. So in recent years, China, they even like puts this regulation to impose limit, how much time a kid can play video game every day. But sadly, there's no evidence this policy actually have worked. So what really happens is, each person can have one account that is associated with a certain number of hours every day. And after the children, they use up their account, they will ask their grandparents and say, can I borrow your account? So that's why you see seemingly like a lot of grannies are playing video games. So that's why all of these make me feel, perhaps it's not enough to just focus and study, our emotional world, and to study, our rich emotions. We also have to study our rich values, about how much we actually value, doing things that benefit ourselves and benefit others, how much we want to improve ourselves, how much we care about other people's well-being, we want to contribute to groups and even humanity as a whole. So basically, these are just, like a list of the projects I have been working on each direction. So basically, like we have found, for example, in terms of the values, like even young children, they care about the contributions to the common good. They appreciate like actions that benefit society and humanity as a whole. And even like just within the domain of the self, they care more about, only the material aspects of the self, but they also think there are duties to the self. They care about their uniqueness, their autonomy, their rights, their realization of their potentials, and people like have ideas about possible selves as well. So basically, taken together, so the general view is, so today this talk, I focus on realizing the potential of our inner life. But the full title I had in mind is actually realizing the potential of our inner life by transcending the self, by going outside of the self. So I want to say, traditionally, self-transcendence has been thought, for example, by Abraham Maslow as, one of the highest stage in human development. Basically, only very few percentage of people can attain like this stage. And and it's very mysterious, like why and how like people actually can have self-transcendence. But actually, I'm thinking totally the reverse. So I'm thinking it's not just 1%. I think it's 100%. So actually, I believe so there is a seed of self-transcendence within each of us. So basically, my findings have let me see, even very young children, they are capable of having experiences and appreciating emotion that greatly transcend the self. And I believe like by be more aware of this type of by this type of capacity, by being more aware of the seed of self-transcendence and bring it out in our life. I believe that's how we could really realize the potential of our life. Yeah. So I would like to acknowledge like all of my students, collaborator lab managers, and research assistants, and also like the Center for Practical Wisdom here. So, well, thank you, everyone. Do we still have time
Yeah,
for
before we
questions?
start with any questions, we just had a couple expressions of gratitude. The chat was very active today, so I just wanted to get some of those out. Jim Little says, I like this. Professor Yang is documenting the wisdom and morality that children already bring to the table. Let's try to not beat it out of them in school. And Johan Josef says, thanks for the lecture. Professor Fan, you landed the happiness plane for me quite nicely.
Well, thank you so much.
Yes, we're going to start with Shannon on the questions.
So just a quick comment in response to let's not have them like a crunch at school. So basically, like I think one general developmental finding is whatever we have in children as children, they don't usually easily go away. I mean, for good or for bad. Like a lot of tendencies, they still exist within us. Like with a lot of time pressure, or like you will see like those kind of studies. They just review our deep tendencies. So I think I do not worry too much about that. And yeah, okay.
Thank you so much, Fan, for truly wonderful talk. Going back all the way to happiness and then looking forward, I thought you did a really nice job highlighting for us how goodness seems to play a role for thinking about happiness. But I'm wondering to what degree agency matters, right? So is it enough just to accidentally be good, or do you have to choose to be good in order to be happiness? And then building on that, looking at meaning, as your children were making these buildings, the evidence of what they did, of their agency, was in the building until you reframed that by saying, no, you have the agency to see that the actual goal of your action was just to be happy, right? And so I'm wondering to what degree agency is playing a role throughout all of this work, whether it be happiness, whether it be meaning, whether it be flow, right, where there is an inferred goal that one can attain for the self or others. Yeah,
that's a great question. And there are actually existing adult and children's findings showing, like we'll ask people to share. Explicitly, just ask them to share. They actually derive less happiness feelings from they share spontaneously. So it seems like it has to come from the person. So in other words, like it's agency, like perceived by the person that actually brings this sense of happiness. Feeling, they are doing this as an obligation or out of external force it can even backfire to some extent. And we also have some findings showing, adults actually feel doing supererogatory actions. So those actions that go beyond our duty actually can bring higher levels of happiness and meaning compared to obligatory actions. Even if it's the same action they are doing, by just framing those actions as, obligated, expected by society, actually makes people feel, less happy and less meaningful to do it. So.
When you reach that self-transcendence, what do you do at that point? How do you maintain it? Do you refresh it? Or do you find it like, hey, I made it to the final game over, I'm happy forever? Yeah. And if you have to keep refreshing it, how do you keep that process from becoming its own version of a Sisyphus? I reached this, I found meaning, and I've lost that meaning, and I got to start over.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I have to say, so basically, to answer this question, I have to point out a major difference between my thought and the previous schools of thought on this question. So basically, previously, they think of self-transcendence as a trait or as a stage we could be in. It's like, how high you grow. If you are short, then you grow higher, right? So, but I'm not thinking of self-transcendence as trait at all. I'm thinking it's more as a state. It could be an emotional state, as I talk about. It could also be a moral state. So basically, it's something like we can lose momentarily, or we can, or to say from the positive, we can also do it and appreciate it at any time. So I view it as something like fully under our control. And so I think it's more in line with the idea, like Aristotle's idea, like by being moral means like you have to practice all the time. So it's not like, you either have it or you can either lose it. So it's a constant kind of practice. But I can also imagine, by being constantly doing that, it can become our more habitual kind of way of experiencing the world and interacting with others. So basically, I'm also experimenting on myself all the time and trying just to see, how constantly trying to have myself in that state, how that affects me. And so far, I think the experiment is going very well. But I hope to do more real experiments and involving this effect. Yeah.
So we are actually over time.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if there was any pressing questions that needed to be asked, but thank you, Fan, for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Well, this is really the most engaged